Lately, after Dan's bath, I've noticed white threads floating in the bathtub. When I asked Dan about it, he just evades the question. On the eve of Dan going on a business trip, he gave me some aromatherapy oil that's supposed to help with morning sickness. After using it nightly as Dan instructed, I experienced severe abdominal pain and had to call for an ambulance. At the maternity clinic, when I explained the situation, the doctor was shaken. He said it was an aromatherapy oil that could endanger both the mother and baby. Suspicious of Dan's infidelity, I called his office and found out he had taken a personal day off to match the dates with Cindy. Heading to Cindy's apartment, I waited in the car and soon saw Cindy and Dan coming from across the street.
I want to live together soon.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for us to live apart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not even good with kids.
I buried my face in the steering wheel and sobbed. Eventually, I lifted my head and swore revenge on Dan and Cindy. I will never forgive them. I am May, a 40-year-old housewife. I met Dan at work and we got married 5 years ago. Dan works for a major company. He's a rank-and-file employee, but earns a good salary due to his diligent work. Recently, I finally got pregnant, something I've always wanted. Looking at the ultrasound picture, I eagerly anticipated the day I would meet our baby. But lately, I've been unbearably anxious. Something was off about Dan. Eventually, I realized Dan's true nature, and it sent chills down my spine. I became close to Dan when I was assigned to his team at his company, a subsidiary where we worked together. Dan, who was not the aggressive type at work, but was adored by his boss and loved by colleagues, had a gentle demeanor. Being someone who struggled with communication and took time to open up to others, I admired Dan. So when he asked me out, I seriously wondered what he saw in me. When he finally proposed, he answered with a gentle smile.
I like that you seem modest and obedient, and I find your looks appealing.
As someone who is self-conscious about being petite and having a youthful face, I was surprised but also felt joy. Afterward, we asked Dan's boss to be our go-between, and we got married. The first year passed without major issues, as we both reveled in our newlywed life. However, starting from the second year, I began struggling with balancing household chores and work. Dan had forgotten our promise to share domestic duties and started dumping all the housework on me.
I know it's tough, May, since you're working full-time too, but I just can't relax with the house in disarray.
I was puzzled. I kept up with the dishes and laundry diligently. It was just that I couldn't find the time to vacuum every day, leaving a bit of dust in the corners of the room. I wipe everything with cleaning wipes every day. We live in an apartment, and it would be bothersome to others if I vacuum early in the morning or late at night.
Yeah, I get that, but I like things clean. It just doesn't feel comfortable for me.
Despite saying this, Dan's study was always a mess. He told me not to enter his study, so I only peeked from the hallway. During that time, I was horrified by the sight of his completely cluttered room. The room was so cluttered with empty snack bags, liquor cans, and car magazines that there was hardly any place to step. His desk at work is tidy because he cares about appearances. Dan's complaints continued.
The meals have been pretty simple lately. You're just reheating pre-made stuff. I want freshly made food, but this feels no different from ready-made meals.
I was astonished. He compared the meals I prepared during the weekends to ready-made meals. Look, keeping the house spotless, cooking fresh meals all the time, and working full-time. That's impossible without hiring a housekeeper.
Then why don't you quit your job?
Dan said that coolly. But what about?
You could just become a full-time homemaker. I'll work more to make up for it.
A wave of anxiety swept over me. What if we have a child in the future and the education costs exceed our budget? While I was hesitating for an answer, Dan looked into my face and smiled kindly.
I'm worried about your body. It hurts to see you go limp every day.
Dan,
Please, become a homemaker for me.
I was proud of my job. I enjoyed my work environment and wanted to continue until retirement if possible, but I didn't want to cause Dan worry. After much hesitation and regretfully bidding farewell by my colleagues and boss, I resigned. I've always been shy and take time to warm up to others. But once I get close to someone, I tend to have deep and long-lasting relationships. That's why I vowed to always cherish Dan, whom I became involved with. Dan also treated me with care. However, as soon as I became a full-time homemaker and started depending on Dan's income, he began to adopt an intimidating attitude towards me.
Really? The orthopedic clinic changed doctors?
Yes, it used to be a female doctor. When I went there after a long time, her son in his 20s was treating me. He took over as the head of the clinic because his mother retired. Dan showed his displeasure when I mentioned going to the hospital after twisting my ankle.
Then stop going there. We'll switch to the hospital in the next town where a female doctor works.
But they asked me to keep coming until I'm fully healed.
No way.
He raised his voice unusually.
Just the thought of a young man touching your leg makes me feel sick. Are you okay with that?
I was surprised by Dan's words. It's just a medical examination. It can't be helped.
There are other doctors, right? We're changing to the next town next time. Otherwise, I'll stop giving you money for the visits.
Reluctantly, I switched to a hospital in the next town to appease Dan's jealousy. I didn't realize he was this jealous. I laughed to myself, but it gradually became no laughing matter. The next thing Dan complained about was my regular hair salon. When I mentioned that my stylist was going on maternity leave and I would be seen by a male hairstylist next, Dan secretly visited the salon and then started nitpicking.
That guy is no good. Paying $50 for such a haircut is a ripoff. Why don't you change to someone else?
I was taken aback, but calmly explained. That's the going rate around here. He's well regarded among people I know.
How so? He's just popular for his looks. He must be hitting on his clients.
Don't say that. He has a wife and kids.
Then it's cheating.
Dan sneered.
Just thinking of that guy touching your hair with his sleazy hands makes me so frustrated I can't sleep at night.
What? It's just a haircut. Stop making a fuss. Despite my protest, I eventually switched to another salon because he wouldn't stop complaining. Dan began to find fault even with me just going out briefly.
It's odd for a housewife to be out and about all the time. You should devote more to me.
What are you talking about? I do all the housework properly. I didn't quit my job just to be cooped up at home all day. Hey, if I want to go back to work, maybe part-time would be manageable.
No way.
Dan flatly refused.
The housework would surely suffer. I'm supporting us. So what's there to be dissatisfied about?
I was speechless at Dan's frowning face. When I confided in my college friend, Tanya, she was also astonished. Tanya works in the HR department at Dan's company.
Dan listens to us at work and never shows disdain towards women, but I see he's different in private.
He uses male chauvinism as an excuse, and it's troubling, but I don't want to fight with Dan, and he doesn't verbally abuse me, so I'm at a loss. Sipping coffee at a cafe, I sighed.
If it gets any worse, talk to me. I'm on your side, May.
Thanks. I replied with a smile, but I gradually became reluctant to go out and started to spend my days feeling depressed. One day, after feeling unwell for a while, I tried a pregnancy test, and it turned out positive. I couldn't help but cry out in the bathroom. I was so happy I cried, having almost given up hope due to my age. When I told Dan upon his return home, he momentarily tensed up before smiling.
Really? I can't believe it.
Me neither. I'll get it checked at the hospital tomorrow. I'll make sure to go to a place with a female doctor.
When should we tell your parents?
Let's wait until it's stable.
Right. We don't know yet if everything will be okay.
His words troubled me, but they were true. For now, I'll focus on having a healthy baby. However, contrary to my excitement, Dan seemed unwelcoming of the pregnancy. He had always said he was not fond of children and had agreed that we would give up if natural conception didn't happen. But I hoped his feelings would change now that we were expecting. There are plenty of people who say they don't like kids, but love their own. So I casually brought up the topic every day, hoping to make the reality of our baby feel more real to him. Nova, Halora, Freya. Modern names are so stylish, aren't they? Unisex names seem to be the trend. I continued speaking, undeterred by Dan, who was absorbed in his phone. What kind of names do you like, Dan?
Can't you see I'm busy? I'll leave it up to you, May.
I couldn't hide my disappointment at his curt response. On another day. You're taking a day off soon, right? There's a prenatal checkup that day. Let's go together.
Why should a man go? It's not like it matters to me.
I felt my cheeks stiffen. It was strange to hear it doesn't matter from a father-to-be. He delivered the final blow with a half smile, leaving me speechless.
I'm not good with horror movies. So spare me the delivery room, okay?
I was utterly disappointed by the inappropriate comparison, especially since childbirth is a life-threatening endeavor. However, plagued by morning sickness, I didn't have the energy to argue with Dan. Nausea, drowsiness, and lethargy made it almost impossible for me to cook or clean. Spending the day slumped on the sofa wasn't unusual anymore. I was worried about Dan's complaints, but it seemed even he found it difficult to grumble when I was frequently rushing to the restroom. Passing through the hallway with laundry, I heard the shower and remembered. Indeed, after Dan bathed, there were always white threads floating in the bathtub. It's thinner than human hair, and when scooped up, it's about 3 centimeters long. When I asked Dan about it, after a brief silence, he chuckled and shrugged.
That's just dirt, May. You are slacking off on cleaning the bath, aren't you?
No, it doesn't seem like that. I can't explain it well.
All right. Let's try to clean more, okay?
I felt brushed off, but not wanting to argue, I didn't press further. Not wanting to bathe in a tub with mysterious floating threads, I decided to stick to showers for the time being. The connection between Dan and the threads remained unclear. His recent string of late nights at work and increased business trips might be related. One Friday, Dan approached me with a beaming smile.
I've got a business trip to Chicago starting tomorrow. Sorry to leave you alone for a week, especially when you were having such a hard time with the morning sickness.
It's part of your job. It can't be helped. Take care, okay?
Yeah. By the way, I got something good.
He handed me a stylish white box. When I opened it, there were 7 small bottles with black lids lined up inside. Is this aromatherapy oil?
Yes, it's supposed to help with morning sickness.
Dan seemed excited.
A colleague's wife tried it and her appetite came back.
Really? How do I use it?
Add it to the bath water. It's effective as an aromatherapy bath. I asked for the instructions and wrote them down, so use it like this.
I'm not fond of artificial scents and usually stay away from aromatherapy oils and incense. I was grateful Dan wrote down the instructions. While reading the note, Dan stressed seriously.
Make sure you do it every day. For your sake, and the baby's as well.
Got it. Thank your colleague for me. From the day Dan left on his business trip, I took an aromatherapy bath every night. Not seeing any white threads, I felt safe soaking in the water. Let's see, 1 bottle per 200 liters of water. That's quite a lot. As I poured it into the bathtub, a potent fragrance wafted up with the steam. It seemed relaxing and likely beneficial for the baby as well. There were no immediate effects, but perhaps my appetite would be back by the time Dan returned from his trip. I continued using it, feeling hopeful, and reached the 5th day. During the bath, I suddenly felt a dull pain in my lower abdomen. Initially dismissing it as constipation, the pain intensified. Moaning in pain, I changed into my home clothes and called an ambulance. I was crushed by the fear that something might have happened to the baby. I informed them I was pregnant and asked to be taken to my regular maternity clinic. As I tried to explain my condition to the female head doctor, she crinkled her nose.
Did you put any bath additives in your water?
I've been taking aromatherapy baths. The doctor frowned. My husband got it from a colleague. It's supposed to be good for morning sickness. I don't know if it's related to the abdominal pain, so I brought it with me just in case. When I handed over the note and the bottle of aromatherapy oil my husband had given me, the doctor's face changed, and she started trembling. "Doctor,
Did you use this daily in an enclosed bathroom?
yes." After a moment of hesitation, the doctor told me in a firm voice,
The herb used in this aromatherapy oil can cause uterine contractions. It's strictly forbidden for pregnant women. It could have caused a miscarriage.
Everything went dark before my eyes. I felt faint but managed to stay conscious and urgently requested an examination. Fortunately, the baby was safe. I was told that my body should recover with some rest. I stayed in the hospital overnight and returned home by taxi the next morning. Back home, I still couldn't believe it. I had used the oil exactly as Dan had told me, and yet it had almost endangered our baby. I felt an urgent need to confront him with my anger. Waiting for his lunch break, I called Dan's mobile, but it just kept ringing. A bad feeling suddenly crossed my mind. His recent aloof behavior, the sudden increase in overtime and business trips, and now this incident. I had heard that many husbands cheat during their wife's pregnancy. Deciding to check with Tanya, I called her mobile. "Sorry to bother you during your break, but listen." Tanya gasped on the other end of the line.
So you're in a place with signal now.
"What are you talking about?"
Aren't you supposed to be feeling sick from morning sickness and staying at your parents' place? I heard it's in the countryside with poor signal, so I held back from sending messages. Since Dan is with you, I thought it would be okay.
"I'm at home."
What do you mean?
I heard Dan is on a business trip to Chicago. I could hear Tanya sighing.
He must have wanted to prevent me from contacting you, perhaps fearing his affair would be exposed.
That's what it is. Hey, is there a female employee who took time off during the same period?
Let me check. Oh, it's Cindy from the accounting department. Should I give you her address?
Yes, please. My anger outweighed my shock. I was sure Dan was there. I hung up and drove to the address Tanya had given me. I forgot my nausea in the heat of my anger. I parked my car where I could see the front entrance of the apartment building and waited for Dan and Cindy to appear. My car was common enough that I wasn't worried about being noticed while lying in wait. After about an hour, a couple holding hands approached from the other side of the street. Dan was with a woman with flashy makeup. She must be Cindy. Dan, carrying a heavy eco bag, looked visibly thrilled. Looking at him ignited a fiery anger in me. He was brazenly having an affair after putting me through such a hellish ordeal.
It's like we're newlyweds. It's so fun.
Cindy's shrill voice could easily be heard down the street.
I can't wait to live with you, Dan.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house. Divorce is tricky, but separation should be safe.
Cindy agreed with Dan's smug assertion.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for you both to live apart. You're so smart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not good with kids.
Even after they disappeared into the apartment, I sat there stunned for a while. Then, intense rage surged from within. Tears overflowed from my eyes before I realized it. I'm so frustrated and ashamed. I felt nauseous as I blamed myself for not seeing through and trusting such a person. Leaning over the steering wheel, I sobbed. Eventually, lifting my head, I gritted my teeth and vowed revenge on Dan and Cindy. Dan and Cindy, I will never forgive you. 2 days later. In the afternoon, I went with Tanya, who had taken the afternoon off, to Cindy's apartment. I stayed outside the entrance hall to avoid being seen by the intercom camera.
Hello, Tanya. What brings you here?
When Tanya pressed the intercom, Cindy responded immediately. Her saccharine voice was grating.
Weren't you supposed to finish some documents at home? You left some materials on your desk.
Cindy easily believed Tanya's lie.
Oh no, silly me. Thank you. I'll go get them now.
It's okay, I'll bring them up to your room.
Really? Then please do. I'll unlock the door for you.
Once the door was opened, we went up to Cindy's apartment in the elevator. Making sure I wasn't caught on camera, I stayed back while Tanya called Cindy out. Soon the door opened, and Cindy, in a bathrobe and casual clothes, appeared. Taking a shower in the middle of the afternoon. How luxurious. They might have been planning to get cozy with each other after this.
Tanya, you're a lifesaver. Really reliable. Eat.
Cindy let out a sharp scream when I suddenly showed my face. As she tried to close the door, I wedged my bag in, slid my hand into the gap, and pried the door open. Cindy, with a resigned look, allowed Tanya and me into the room. From a half-open room at the end of the hall, we could hear Dan speaking in baby talk. Tiptoeing down the hallway and peering into the room, I saw Dan in just his underwear. His eyes softened, brushing a long-haired cat.
Tuna, you're being such a good boy, staying still. I'll give you a treat later. Your fur is so smooth and silky today. You're the most handsome cat in the world.
Meow.
So that's it. The white threads were the white cat's fur. No wonder there was so much fur. He brushed his bare upper body against it, and he didn't rinse himself before getting in the bath. How could he do that before I, a pregnant woman, used it afterward? Eck, that's gross. Rage bubbled up as I saw Dan's affectionate face toward the cat. He cared more for his affair partner's cat than for our unborn child. The cat was the first to notice my resentful gaze. It flinched, looking scared, and ran to a corner of the room.
What's wrong, Tuna? Come and play with Daddy.
Since when did you become a cat's dad? Or did you get Cindy pregnant too? Dan's eyes widened as I stepped into the living room.
Why are you?
Dan, you've been careless.
Tanya emerged from behind me, causing him to startle.
That's right. You and Tanya are friends.
Dan exhaled as if in resignation, and Cindy hugged him from behind.
Dan, we've been caught.
It's okay, Cindy. Leave it to me.
His posture, standing there in his underwear, was ridiculous, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation.
How are you feeling, May?
I've told you countless times how bad the morning sickness is.
No, I mean, since you are here, you must be fine.
Didn't your wife stop using the aromatherapy oil?
Cindy interjected.
That's why both the mother and child are healthy.
Oh, right.
You really should trust your husband more.
Cindy smirked, and Dan looked disappointed, which infuriated me even more. I did use it, because I was happy that Dan seemed to care about my well-being. Then I was struck with severe pain and had to call an ambulance. It was almost too late. I shouted, and Cindy interrupted with her sugary tone.
What a shame. A baby that daddy doesn't want should just disappear.
What? Do you even realize what you've done? You tried to take the lives of me and my baby.
That's not true.
Dan smirked dismissively.
It's not even born yet. So treating it like a person is ridiculous. Or are you even pregnant? You're just saying that to get attention because you sensed I was cheating, right?
Exactly. And the morning sickness must be an act, too?
My brain felt like it was boiling with rage at their laughter. I showed you the ultrasound picture, didn't I?
Maybe you borrowed it from another pregnant woman. Your stomach is flat. Can't trust that.
Could be someone else's kid? You know.
Enough from you two.
Even as Tanya scolded them, Dan and Cindy just grinned.
Well, even if it is my kid, I don't want it.
The words "I don't want it" tore my heart.
Don't do things without my permission. You're causing unnecessary trouble?
Why do you deny it so much? Do you hate the idea of being a father that much? Are you that bad with babies? When I confronted him with a question, Dan frowned and retorted sharply.
Of course I hate it. Who's going to take care of me when the baby's born?
Dan then unleashed a tirade of complaints against me.
May, you used to be cute when we got married, but you've gotten ugly with age. Being pregnant makes it unbearable. You become thin, pale, and your skin is rough. No femininity at all.
Pointing at me, he continued his rant.
It's shameful for you to call yourself my wife while looking like that. I should never have married a 35-year-old woman.
And you, Dan, are getting a belly and losing your hair, becoming quite the middle-aged man yourself. Dan completely ignored my comment.
And on top of that, all you talk about lately is the baby. Have you forgotten I'm the main one here? As my wife, you should prioritize me. I don't care about the baby in your stomach.
I was dumbfounded by Dan's words. They were like those of a child. It was clear that both my unborn child and I would be unhappy with him as a father. Cindy, who had been gleefully listening to Dan's tirade, chimed in.
Dan doesn't care about a 40-year-old hag, right? A young beauty like me is what he deserves.
Right. It seems he'd be fine with any young and pretty girl. I agreed with a knowing look to Tanya. Tanya then pulled out not documents, but photos from a large envelope she had brought. Cindy watched curiously as the photos were laid out on the living room table. Looking at Dan, his previously arrogant demeanor had vanished, replaced by an awkward expression and visible unease.
You know about these girls, right, Cindy? They all work in the same sales department as Dan.
What are these?
I've gathered some voice evidence. Let's start the fun.
Hey, stop it, please.
After announcing what she had, Tanya pressed the play button on her phone despite Dan's pleas.
I'm secretly dating Dan. Keep it a secret from others. Cindy is already an old lady at 28, so he switched to a young girl like me.
Dan told me I'm his ideal woman. We've been dating for 3 months now. He's getting a divorce soon, right?
Dan said we should keep our office romance a secret because it would be troublesome if it got out. The trip during his business travel was so fun.
As Cindy's eyes narrowed with increasing anger, Dan looked surprised.
Tanya, how do you know I'm dating these girls?
You've applied for leave or worked overtime on the same days as these girls multiple times. I'm in HR, so it was obvious. When I prodded, they were more than happy to spill everything. They were eager to talk.
To a 24-year-old, 28 and 40-year-old ladies are all old women, right? I taunted Cindy, causing her face to flush. Tearfully, she looked up at Dan with resentment, choking out.
It's awful. To think you were with others besides me.
It's not like that. Cindy, you're the most important. You are the real deal. The others are just for fun.
Dan became flustered and started making excuses.
Look, a man needs a break, right? I can be kind to you, Cindy, because I let off steam with other women. You like to kind me, don't you?
It was nauseating. Instead of making a bad situation worse with poor excuses, he should have just apologized. Predictably, Cindy became furious.
What kind of logic is that?
Why are you mad? You're the one I treat the best. Shouldn't you be happy?
How dare you? I had no idea you were like this.
Cindy was nearly lunging at Dan, screaming and crying, while I watched with a detached gaze. What are you saying? It's because you're this kind of person that you cheat so easily and have no sense of responsibility as a father. You even tried to harm our unborn baby. Cindy stopped crying and looked intently at me. Both of us failed to see the true nature of men.
Shut up. Don't lump me in with you.
She snapped at me and then turned her anger back towards Dan.
Don't think you can do this to me and get away with it.
That's my line. You play the victim, but you were complicit in the aromatherapy oil incident, weren't you? I told Cindy in a stern tone. I've already reported it to the police. Both of you will be arrested for assault. Prepare yourselves. And I recorded all of today's confessions as evidence. Dan looked at me with panic.
Arrest. You turn your husband into the police. If you do that, your baby's father will be a criminal?
Hospitals have a duty to report. I think the clinic director already did. And don't worry, I'll be divorcing you. After exchanging a glance with Dan, Cindy started to defend herself vehemently.
I had nothing to do with it. Dan was the one who planned and executed everything.
Come on. When I complained about my nagging wife, you were the one who suggested using aromatherapy oil to make her ill and drive her out.
What? You got tired of her but said divorce was too complicated. You're the one who came to me asking for a way out.
Being able to come up with the aromatherapy idea. Oh, what a scary woman. Do you perhaps have a criminal record?
That's rich? Og, you're the worst. I only went along with that because you said it would be fine. Then you cheated on me and got caught so easily. I should never have gotten involved with you.
Dan clicked his tongue as Cindy resumed her hysterics.
How annoying. Women think they can get away with anything by crying. Stupid creatures.
Then someone ran the intercom.
Right on time. Please come in.
Tanya answered cheerfully, causing Dan to ask suspiciously.
A visitor?
Yes, our department head, Nicholas.
Cindy instantly stopped crying.
Nicholas?
I live-streamed our conversation to the company group chat. Then he decided to come over right away. Dan's face drained of color. Understandably so. The department head had acted as the mediator at our wedding. Dan tried to avoid divorce to not disgrace the department head and planned to make me ill so I would return to my parents' house. Ignoring the flustered Dan, Tanya let the department head in. He appeared with an angry expression.
Well, boss.
Dan and Cindy, with strained smiles on their faces, were then addressed by the department head.
Both of you will be transferred to a clerical department starting tomorrow.
No way. I got dragged into this.
And I was about to be promoted to section chief in the spring personnel changes. Will this delay my career?
The department head, with a vein throbbing on his temple and a sharp gaze fixed on Dan.
I had a high regard for your diligent work, but to find out you're this kind of person, I'm disappointed.
Nicholas, it's all her fault. I didn't want a child. She got pregnant on her own.
Dan pleaded with tearful eyes, but the department head gave him a frosty glance.
Rather than thinking about promotion, you should consider yourself a candidate for termination. If the company's performance declines, you too will be the first to be let go. Do your best to avoid that.
After being dismissed, Dan's expression turned to one of despair. The department head turned to face me and apologized sincerely.
I'm sorry for the trouble caused by my subordinates. I will ensure they take full responsibility. Please don't hesitate to speak up if you need me to give a statement.
I should be the one apologizing for the inconvenience caused. I apologized to him in return. Dan and Cindy were slumped on the floor, their heads hanging low. I marveled at their audacity, wondering if they truly believed they could treat me so poorly and continue to live peacefully as before. Their brazenness was astounding. I'm preparing to return to my parents' home with Tanya's help. Dan, send the divorce papers there. I will make claims for alimony and child support through a lawyer. I watched as Dan weakly nodded in acknowledgement. Then I left Cindy's apartment, together with Tanya and the department head. The next day, Dan and Cindy were arrested for assault, but were released a week later on probation due to being first-time offenders. I heard that the two of them broke up shortly after. Despite continuing to work in a sideline position at the company, they resigned after being ostracized due to widespread rumors. Having received the alimony, I am indifferent to what happens to them afterward. While Cindy's whereabouts became unknown, Dan, disowned by his parents, resorted to multiple part-time jobs to get by. Tanya mentioned seeing Dan in the city, looking shabby and nothing like his former self at his previous company. My ex-in-laws, upon learning of the incident, traveled from the countryside to apologize to me. I had always been treated well by them and held no resentment toward them. When my daughter was born recently, I cried tears of joy. So I plan to visit my ex-in-laws with her during holidays like summer vacation and Christmas. If she ever wants to meet her father as she grows up, I'll consider accompanying her under certain conditions to fulfill her wish. Seeing my daughter's innocent smile makes me pity Dan for saying he didn't want such a lovely child. Being a mother is challenging, but I feel deeply fortunate to be her mother. I want to continue watching her grow, surrounded by people who love her.